I don't want to sound like a broken record, but we have more indications of your devices getting more expensive. And here's just one of the many reasons why these devices are getting just increasingly more expensive as each new device gets launched. So let me pull up my screen here. And again, this is just one of many reasons. So Snapdragon CPUs are getting a price hike, seemingly with everything else. Now, as I mentioned, it's not just the CPU that's causing the price increases for these devices, because let's face it, look, these manufacturers. Let's just take Samsung for example, since I got it here in front of me. When they put together a new device, they have to source a part supplier for the speaker, a part supplier for the memory, a part supplier for all the little screws that go in there, the ribbon cables, everything. And each component in there is getting more expensive, and that just adds to the total cost of how much it costs Samsung to build each device. And then ultimately, they pass it on to us. Again, we, the end consumer, get screwed. We always do, and always will, unfortunately. But the CPU is the heart and soul of any device. It just is. And these are going to get much more expensive. Now, they're going to help us out, which we're going to get to here, or the manufacturers out, which will in turn help us out, which we're going to get to here in just a minute. But there's a new report Bloomberg put out that is not good news. It says price hikes are coming. Qualcomm Snapdragon chips are going to get more expensive, and this is going to happen quick. So starting September 1st, all Snapdragon chips are going to see a price hike for the manufacturer starting September 1st. Now, the reason provided is that Qualcomm has, quote unquote, exhausted its ability to absorb higher costs from suppliers, meaning they've taken a hit. They've negotiated as much as possible. They've been trying to hold off for as long as possible price increases to their customers. And Qualcomm's customers are Samsung, among others, Xiaomi, OnePlus, Oppo. So they've been trying to hold off the price increase, but at some point they just like, well, we just can't operate taking losses, or a smaller profit margin on our products that we sell to these manufacturers. So when we hear a double digit price increase, what does that mean? Well, double digit percentage price increase. So look, we don't know the exact price increase that these CPUs are going to get more expensive for the manufacturer, but that means at the very least it's going to be 10% higher than it was on August 29th for the same part. So it's not just memory, it's the CPU. And their costs are going up because the labor is going up. The parts to make the CPU, the physical parts, the silicon, the plastic, everything, the metal that goes in there, all that's getting more expensive. And they essentially, at their breaking point where they're going to have to increase prices. Now, Qualcomm saw a ginormous price hike when the Snapdragon 8 Elite came out, just a couple years ago, when that saw a 30% price hike over the previous year. So, unfortunately, as time goes on, stuff's going to get more expensive. Now, Qualcomm is doing something that I think they don't technically have to do, but I think they should do, and they should be applauded for at least trying to help the manufacturer, which in turn helps us, the consumers. What am I talking about? Well, Snapdragon is making a newer, cheaper flagship CPU. So a cheaper Snapdragon 8 Elite Gen 5 variant is reportedly in the works, and it could be a lifeline for budget flagships. Now, that's kind of an oxymoron, a budget flagship. What's a budget flagship? Well, the Motorola Signature would be a budget flagship. It doesn't have the elite version, but it does have the 8 Gen 5, which I guess technically is a budget flagship CPU. The OnePlus 50, well, I guess, well, yeah, they are going to sell OnePluses in China, but essentially what they're doing is the rumored chip would give phone makers a cheaper option as rising costs, rising memory components push the prices up mad high. So this new leak is saying that Qualcomm is repairing a fourth Snapdragon 8 Elite variant. Now this is going to be the model number SM8850-1-AB, offering near flagship benchmark performance at a lower cost aimed at phones priced under roughly $600. That's music to our ears, my ears, all consumers' ears, because that means if these manufacturers are offered a cheaper flagship CPU, let's just take Samsung for example. Let's say now I know the timing is not going to work out right because we're in the middle of a flagship release. So the S26 series was launched in January. The new one's going to be launched. The S27 series is going to be launched in next year in January. We're in the middle of the year, so it kind of doesn't really work out. But just hear me out. So this could give Samsung and other manufacturers a cheaper option. So instead of putting a Snapdragon 8 Elite Gen 5 in the base S26 and S26 Plus, Samsung, for example, could only use the real most powerful, most expensive Snapdragon 8 Elite Gen 5 in the S26 Ultra, and then put the cheaper Snapdragon 8 Elite Gen 5 variant in the base S26 and S26 Plus. You see what I'm saying? It gives them another option to offer their lower end flagships, the base model flagships. That would give them an option to where they don't have to choose the very most expensive CPU, because remember the base flagships are actually a little cheaper, right? The base S26 is technically a flagship, although it starts out at what, $800. Well, if you have a CPU that that's mad expensive, Samsung isn't charging $1,200 like their Ultra model, which gives them more profit. No, the base models in the mid-range flagship models like the S26 Plus, that eats into their profit margin because they're not asking for as much money. The MSRP is lower than on the Ultra, which they have a wider profit margin. So this is a good thing. Qualcomm does need to be applauded for at least attempting something. For Christ's sake, give us, throw us a bone, like, and I say us meaning the consumer, and I guess ultimately I do, but I mean us as in the phone makers too, because like any little bit of relief, any ounce of relief or cheaper options will be widely welcomed. It would be received with open arms, quite honestly. So I do want to applaud Snapdragon. I do want to applaud Qualcomm for giving manufacturers a cheaper flag. And look, it's going to be, y'all know Qualcomm makes fantastic CPUs. So I don't know how or what they're going to do to the current Snapdragon 8 Elite Gen 5 to make it cheaper. I'm assuming they're going to take one core. Let's see. There's 3 versions of the 8 Elite Gen 5 already exist. They're okay, blah, 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 blah. According to the leak, a 4th variant called SM8850-1-AB is due sometime in the coming months, is expected to post benchmark scores close to the standard 8-core version while costing less. Prices for phones, under $600. Okay. The timing lines up. Now, that's kind of what they did with the non-elite model, right? So I think what they're going to, although it's still an octa-core, I think what they're going to do is I think they're going to take a core. Let's see. Even the standard Gen 6 chip, which is expected to trim some features to control costs, is unlikely to come cheap against the backdrop. A refreshed last generation chip still performs close to flagship level. Starts to look like it's an easy call for phone makers, especially since most phones today already offer killer performance, right? So it doesn't specifically mention what Qualcomm is going to do to lower the cost on this budget flagship CPU, my personal opinion, or what the easiest thing to think of, and I may be completely wrong, but they might just remove a core, right? So instead of having an octa-core CPU, they'll remove one of the cores, or maybe they'll remove one of the Orion cores. I know the Orion core is what makes it so special, but I'm sure they've banged heads for months trying to figure out a cheaper solution, or oh, maybe we can do this, or oh, let's see if we can do that. It sounds like they found something and they've ramped production up. So they're going to start production on these and get them out as soon as possible. And this, I cannot wait to see what they come up with, because whatever it is, I know it's going to be awesome. So I'm going to keep a close eye on this. I'm going to let you know here in the coming months what devices we can expect this in, this new CPU in. And I would like to say I would try to get one of these personally just to test the CPU out. I love Qualcomm. I love CPUs, and very interested to see what they have up their sleeve. So stay tuned to the eSIM Studios YouTube channel. I'm going to keep everybody informed to see what devices this is going to come in for better prices for us. Hallelujah. Peace.